Welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Colin Bober.
Hello, and welcome to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Jason Long, Senior Attorney at Colin B. Bober and Associates. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Tangled Up, Navigating the Complexities of Multi-Vehicle Car Wrecks in Texas. Jason, great to have you here. Thanks for being here.
How you doing, Kevin? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's nice to get a break from Colin for a change.
Yeah, I feel that, yeah.
All right, so we're talking about multi-vehicle wrecks today, which are obviously a little more complex to handle compared to single car accidents. Can you kind of talk about some of the broad factors that make these more complex to deal with?
When you've got more vehicles involved, you have more potential claimants, not just potential injury claims, but you also have vehicle and repair and damage claims. So you have to, let's say there's 3 or 4 vehicles involved and all of them are damaged. What they're going to have to try and uncover is fault, of course. Who hit who, where were the impacts? The back car hit the car in front into the others, or did, the 2 cars collide and hit a third? So it really is accident fact specific, number one. But the other part, number 2, really comes into potential claimants and limits issues, not just for potential injury claims, but also for repair claims. One of the things that I will bring to my client's attention, frankly, regardless of whether or not it's multi-car accidents or it's a 2-car accident where they were hit by somebody else, is the question of, do you have collision coverage on your own policy? Because especially in multi-car accidents, you run into, well, how much are the repairs going to be, right? So if one vehicle is at fault in the accident, then they're potentially on the hook for all of the repair claims of all the other damaged vehicles. Right. So most policies in Texas, or at least I should say a ton of the policies, are minimum policies, which usually have like $25,000 in property damage coverage, along with $30,000 in injury coverage per claimant, $60,000 per accident. So when you have multiple accidents that are requiring repairs, the adjuster is going to have to do a pro rata split, and they're going to have to collect all of the repair estimates, which takes a lot longer. And so if you're a client and you're wanting to get your vehicle handled faster, you're going to have to wait until the adjuster gathers all of the repair estimates, and then they're going to try and, pay out from the policy as best as they can, if they can, hoping that a vehicle is not totaled, because that's expensive, or doesn't have a very, heavy repair bill that still may be under the total loss threshold. But the way to simplify that is I'll say to my clients and say, do you have collision coverage? Look at your coverages. If you do, then it's generally advisable that you use it, especially in a multi-car accident situation, because you can get your vehicle handled sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. In a multi-car accident situation versus sort of a 1-car versus 1 car, you're going to be waiting a lot longer. They have to evaluate those repair estimates, like I mentioned before, and then they have to, see if there's enough funds. First off, you may get the short end of the stick, just depending on how bad the damages really are. But usually in the front end, adjusters will say, hey, if there's multi-car, we've got a number of claimants. We have a potential limits issue here. It's advisable that you go through your own insurance. And I know that a lot of clients will say, well, I don't want to go through my own policy. I wasn't at fault in the accident.
Yeah, it's not fair, right? They're going to say it's not fair to me. Why should I have to? But there's not enough money to go around.
That is kind of the big driving factor. It comes down to, do you want to sit and wait and potentially have not enough funds, or do you want to get your vehicle handled sooner rather than later and not have to worry about that headache?
How do they determine fault? It's got to be a lot more challenging to determine fault when you have more vehicles involved, right?
It depends. It depends on police report. It'll depend on statements from the drivers, and their own insurance company will speak with them. Photos, witnesses. So it's not really that much different than any other accident per se in terms of what they're going to look at least. But some can be more complex than others. Sometimes people try to take evasive actions and wind up hitting something else, and it ricochets, and it can get crazy out there. But they're still going to at least try to do what they can to review all the facts of loss and try to make a proper determination, hopefully based on the circumstances.
Are you seeing more dash cams now? I feel like people I know, or more people I know, have dash cams now. And if you have a multi-car wreck, if someone has a dash cam, that could be really helpful.
Yes, more and more people are using them. They're adding them to their vehicles. I actually did have one case that I can recall within the last several months that somebody was actually a witness who had a dash cam, who saw the collision where my client got hit at an intersection, and they were nice enough to at least get a copy of that footage to help make the proper liability decision. But yeah, I have seen that more and more people are using them, and yeah, they can be beneficial, especially when there's a lot of word of mouth, or perhaps when a police report may not be as thorough. Police reports are not perfect, so those kinds of things can definitely assist.
Can you walk us through the process of gathering evidence in these kind of situations? I mean, does your process change when there's multiple cars versus if it's just kind of a one-on-one?
It depends on which car you are in the sequence. If you are, let's say there's 4 cars involved, and the number 1 car is all the way in the back, hits 2 into 3 into 4, and you're the front vehicle number 4, so to speak, you may have potential claims against all 3 vehicles because you were, the sequence of events. Versus, let's say you were car number 2, you were hit by 1, and then your vehicle hit into 3, and then perhaps 4 if there's another vehicle. You may only have a claim against the original car that hit you behind, that hit you from behind, I should say. So it just depends. I mean, you're still going to generally look to the police report, the facts of loss, speak with your client. Photos are always helpful, any witnesses. So you're still going to go through and do your due diligence. It just can vary based on the circumstances and vary based on who you may have potential claims against.
As far as the insurance company, you mentioned the adjusters a little bit earlier, but when they're figuring out the settlement process and who's paying who and all that stuff, how do they approach the multi-car wrecks when there's so many different people involved?
It really just depends on how they, or I should say, when they determine fault, they can either do a percentage based. Let's say that it wasn't just one vehicle, there were 2 vehicles that were, let's say, negligent in the accident, or the contributing factors in the accident. They might do a split percentage, or they might say that one is primarily responsible and the other might be sort of secondary coverage. That's something that they usually work out internally amongst themselves. After they've made a determination of fault, let's say it's a percentage based, or they're splitting, or they're going to say, well, this is primary and we're secondary coverage, or whatever they come out with. You want to get your demand in there based on the facts of your treatment and your injuries, and let them fight it out. Let them sort it out. So we send in our demand to one or multiple insurance companies. Again, dependent upon where in the sequence of events your vehicle is and where your claims may lie. You may have one or more demands that you're sending in. Let them sort it out. Let them fight it out, instead of us trying to get into the weeds about the numbers and the percentages, and trying to just let them fight it out between themselves and go from there. See if they want to field any offers or send any offers your way, and then just take it step by step from there.
Do you have to do more negotiating in this situation because there's various insurance companies involved, so that you can ensure fair compensation for your client?
You could. It really just depends on the circumstances and how they've decided to apportion fault is probably the better word. Do they want to negotiate? Do they want to play ball, or do they want to just kind of kick it to the curb, and then you might have to file suit on it and sue everybody and sort it out that way? So each situation is a little dependent upon the facts and circumstances. So there could be some negotiating or some litigating. It just depends.
Yeah. Colin and I have talked before about, how important it is to document a lot, everything you can after a crash, if you're physically able. Obviously, if there's multiple cars involved, there's a lot more to document. Do you advise people to to focus on certain things when multiple cars are involved that they might not have to worry about as much in a single car or a two car accident?
Take as many photos as you can of the scene. I know not everybody has the wherewithal to take perfect photos or proper photos or sufficient
Yeah.
or enough photos at the time because they're adrenaline. They're on the phone with their insurance. They're calling significant others. I was just in an accident. They may be getting into an ambulance. They may be getting treatment on the scene. There's a lot of things all happening at once for them to just say, hold on a second, I need to take better scene photos because it's a multi-car accident. They're just not usually not going to have that wherewithal. But in a perfect scenario, you'd probably want to get full scene photos, all damage photos of the vehicles involved, the front, back, and sides, where it happened, people that may have been involved, exchanging information, any nearby witnesses. I mean, it's a lot of legwork in a high pressure situation. That would be the perfect or trending towards a perfect scenario. But it's similar to other kinds of accidents where you collect the evidence that you have. The client comes in the door and says, I was in the accident. Here's my police report. Here are the photos. Here are my injuries. This is what's going on. This is the information I could gather. And you just kind of go from there.
Yeah, it feels like you're right. I can only I've never, knock on wood, been in an accident where I had to take pictures and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right about the wherewithal. Like, you just, even if you're not hurt, you're just so rattled that you're just not thinking clearly about everything. So we have these conversations and hopefully people listen and they might get a little bit of a, something that pops in their brain after an accident because they've heard this, but it is a lot to ask. Do you have any stories or a particular story you like to tell about a situation where you had to handle a multi-car wreck for your client?
When it comes to, I know we're talking about multi-vehicle accidents. One of the other points that I might have touched on earlier was it's not just vehicles, it's claimants. I think the more important point is the number of claimants, because you can have, let's say, a three-car accident where car number one is at fault and the other two vehicles were damaged. And within the other two vehicles, let's put one driver in each. So there's two drivers within each vehicle that are potential claimants for property damage and injuries. So you have two potential claimants. Now you can also say, well, we represent a client in a two-car accident. The other vehicle hit our two clients within our one vehicle. You still have two potential injury claimants as far as the clients that we're representing. So it's similar. It's not multiple vehicles in terms of three or more, it's claimants. You still have claims against the at-fault driver. Where it gets a little bit more complex is when you're representing one vehicle and there's three or more in the vehicle. So let's say it's a two-car accident and you have the driver and two passengers, and we represent all three of those people in that vehicle. That's when it can get a little bit challenging, because that is a potential limits issue that I started to mention earlier for an injury claim. So the vehicle property damage shouldn't be a limits issue necessarily. Usually it's one car and one car. But the challenge can be when you have three or more potential BI or injury claimants within one vehicle that you're representing. Because if you have a min policy or minimum policy of $30,000 on the at-fault driver, well, then it's usually $30,000 per person, $60,000 combined total for the accident. So then you have a pot of $60,000 to divvy up or negotiate with three or more potential claimants in that one vehicle that you're representing. So depending on the injuries, you may have a potential limits issue, and that's where it can sort of get complex, where depending on the significance of the injuries, depending on the significance of the treatment, there may or may not be enough coverage for one or the other people combined. Then you start to look at alternate forms of coverage, whether or not there's any additional underinsured motorist coverage or PIP and PIP coverage. So yes, there are some instances that I've had to wait until the end where all three of them, for instance, are done treating. Then you send in what's called a global demand. And so basically they have to do somewhat of a pro rata split if they can, based on the medical treatment for each particular person, because they only have, let's say, a $60,000 policy to work with. So I've had a number of clients that I've had to do that for, but they will, in certain instances, with obviously just that limited amount of money that we're using as an example, they will do a pro rata split to try and get them resolved and settled successfully, hopefully, based on the treatment that they sustained. So it's, I just sort of to tie it all up together, it's not just vehicles, but it's also how many claimants are there. That's where it can also get complex. We talked about pro rata split for the repairs, but you're also potentially talking about pro rata split for the injuries, which are obviously the separate claims as well. So that can be an interesting challenge. So hopefully it works out positively for your clients, but sometimes it's a little bit of a rude awakening when there's not enough coverage for their vehicle, especially, or there's not enough coverage for their injuries. Sometimes it's a rude awakening.
Yeah, that's super complex. I'm glad people like you do that, because I don't want to.
It's not. Yeah, you have to pay attention to make sure you understand what's going on, and you try to do your best ahead of time. There's only so many things that you can control, so right. You just got to take it step by step as you go along.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Secrets of Personal Injury Law with Jason Long. To connect with Jason and the team, visit boberlawfirm.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Jason, so good having you here. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.